Hello everyone, and happy Tuesday to you. I hope you've had a good day or you're having a good evening, and it's great to be here on this video again today. So what we're going to cover today is the theme of conflict, and this can be something that arises in every aspect of our lives. It can be in our professional life, in our personal life. I'm probably coming at it more from the career leadership style of aspects of life, if you like. So what I'm going to cover today is types of conflict, why it's dangerous, and different sort of tools and tips to help you resolve conflict. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but conflict is inevitable because we can't always agree with everybody, and everybody that we meet has a slightly different way of going about things. It doesn't make them right, it doesn't make them wrong, it just makes it different. So there will be differences that we experience with other people. So that is what I'm going to be covering tonight, conflict. And it's actually something I do quite a lot of talks on, and it's surprising how many people don't like conflict when I ask them this at the beginning of the talk, but it seems to be one of the most popular topics that I talk on. So I find it absolutely fascinating because, personally speaking, I'm someone that I like being a very upfront, open and honest person, and some people find that quite difficult to deal with, and some people find that confrontational, or but it's just, for me, it's about being upfront and honest. But I know for some people with different styles, I have to adapt my style to work around other people. Hello, nice to see you, Andrew. Yes, I haven't forgotten. So anyway, so I'm going to cover off different types of conflicts. I'll give you some tools. Now, these tools are predominantly, I'm coming at it from a career business angle, as I mentioned. However, you could actually use these in your personal relationships because there's a very well-established model for conflict. I think it's the Kilman model. I'll go into that in a bit, about how you can get to a win-win situation. Now, I'm not Marge Proops or an agony aunt in terms of love life and romance and all of that. However, if you do apply some of those principles, they work in personal relationships as well. And conflict could be something that is just having to renegotiate something. It could be outwardly disagreeing with someone. It could be somebody where there is just an almighty clash. I was speaking with somebody the other day. I was coaching a lady, and she said, "Oh, well, I just find this guy, he's such a difficult character." And I was like, oh gosh, I don't find him difficult at all, but I'm a very different person to her. So, it's horses for courses. Different styles suit different people, and sometimes it's about adapting our approach. Okay, so first things first, for me, the conflict word is a bit of a C-bomb because it does have some red flags. It's charged with emotion. It's like the word confrontation, and I think it's one of those words that has an emotional charge to it, because it's like, oh, conflict, oh my goodness, it means fight, and I think if you look back at the origins of the word, it does mean to fight, to battle, all of that stuff. So it does mean those things. However, perhaps if it's a word that you feel, oh, I've got this conflict with someone, or I'm not good at conflict resolution, change the word, change the meaning, reframe it. Say, maybe call it, not conflict, but I need to think about how I negotiate my relationships. I need to think about how I manage upwards, or think about looking at what the specific thing is that you want to manage, or I want to enhance. Think about the end goal. Well, I want to enhance my communications with my manager. I want to manage upwards better. So how do I do that? Rather than thinking of the conflict, maybe think about, as Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Think about what it is, the result that you would like to achieve, because as long as it's a positive, forward-looking goal or achievement that you want, I'm sure it's not going to be too different for the other person as well. If it is, then there is a specific difference of opinion. That's when there is more of a conflict. But maybe try and reframe it, because sometimes when we tell ourselves, I keep saying this, that we're all one system. Our brain is a computer. Our brain doesn't know the difference between negative and positive. Therefore, if we tell ourselves all the time, God, that guy's a difficult person and I'm never going to get on with them, guess what? It's like programming a computer. That is how you will internalize those words, that word, those words, that feeling will come out in your body language, your tone of voice, how you show up. It will emanate from every pore of your body over time if it's really sort of quite emotionally charged for you. So think about how you can maybe reframe that word, unless it is a really difficult conflict you're dealing with, but then maybe just reframe that as well and say, look, I've got a fundamental difference of opinion with this person. I'm sure I'm going to find a solution, or I'm working my way towards a solution. So start with the end in mind. Now, conflict can be good, it can be bad. If there's conflict going on where it's an unhealthy work relationship and you're experiencing poor treatment, bullying, and it's affecting your mental health and your stress, or your physical health, then of course that's something completely different, and that's something you really must get addressed as soon as possible, because nothing's worth our physical health and our stress levels. So whatever you do, if you are in that situation where it's like, do you know what, I can't see the wood for the trees, then please do get some help. Speak to a friend, speak to a mentor, speak to your boss, speak to a colleague. Try and get some, just to offload. Always take other people's advice, who are friends, partners, with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because sometimes even our lovely partners, our friends, may not see the world in the same way that we do. So take sometimes their advice with a pinch of salt, but find a way to discuss and get out of your mind what's going on. Don't stay, whatever you do in a situation that is making you feel less than, that's affecting you, find somebody to talk to. It's really, really important. I do really believe that a problem shared is a problem halved. Even if you're an introvert, more introspective person, people that are more introverts still sometimes need somebody to talk to, okay? So conflict is part of everyday life. It can happen moment by moment. It can be something that just happens and it's like, whoa, how did that come about? And I've dealt with those in my career. And when it's something like that, I've felt confident enough in myself, being quite an assertive person, to politely go and arrange to have a talk with that person and say, look, what just happened there? Could we find a way of not airing that conflict in public, for example? So I have had examples of that where it's a bit in the moment. I've taken a bit of a deep breath. I've then gone to the person and said, how can we, I'd like to talk to you about what just happened, or I've set up a meeting and be very clear what the agenda is. So it can happen moment by moment, but actually some of the more insidious conflicts are those where things get left unsaid. Now, it could be that if you're leading a team or running a business, establishing a business, perhaps there are things that you need to discuss with your team, your suppliers, whoever it is, your stakeholders, your customers. I'm afraid sometimes there is a bit of conflict now and again in life. Sometimes it can be that we're just having a bad day, we're tired and we're stressed. And when we're stressed, we are a bit more sensitive. And what we think is common sense isn't everybody else's common sense. Not everybody understands where we are at that point in time. So it's very, very different. There's leadership conflict, as I mentioned, where the team's not feeling happy because things have been left unsaid, or people don't feel they're getting the career progress they need. So if you're managing a team or starting a business, make sure you've got your plans to manage your team, manage your suppliers, manage your goals in that way. I'm not going to cover that in too much detail. There are work style differences. So for example, I do disc profiling. I offer that as a service, and that allows people that I work with who are going through fundamental career shifts to really analyse and look at what the data is telling them about, gosh, this is my style, this is how I communicate, this is how I react when somebody says this to me, this is how I show up, and this is how I can behave under stress. And I do those for individuals going through career shifts to help them find an environment that will suit them. But also I work with teams to really identify what's the culture of the team and the leadership there. So there can be work style differences that you may think, oh my God, you know what, that person just sits at their desk all day and they don't say anything. But maybe that's because that person is somebody who likes to work on their own, work on one topic at a time, one project. They're not somebody like you if you're somebody that likes to work on a multitude of projects and is very extrovert. Let's not forget, extroverts get their energy from directing their energy outwards, speaking with people, being around people. Introverts are the opposite. So there can be just differences in styles. We can shift and adapt our styles. I won't talk about that on the video tonight. That's a subject of perhaps another video in the future. there can be cultural sensitivities, and just being aware that if you are working with people or you are moving into a business that does have a different culture, make sure you do get an understanding of what the culture is in those particular organisations. So I've got a friend of mine that's just moved overseas to work in a country, and it's a very, very different culture in terms of how people work, their working hours, and that's taking some shifting. But make sure you get that education before you come along. And personality clashes, it could just be for whatever reason you just don't get on with that person. And there's an interesting theory that sometimes we don't get on with people who reflect back to us things about ourselves we don't like, or qualities that we feel we don't have. And I'm going to put my hand up. I was like that, gosh, when was it? In the early 2000s, I think, or was it the late, let's say late 1990s. I just really didn't get on with this girl. She kind of jarred with me a bit, and I think there was a little bit of competition. Now, some of that was down to the fact that the brief that our manager was giving us wasn't clear, and I went to her and said, look, can you be clear who's doing what on this particular project? But also I think that potentially she reflected back to me some of my more assertive behaviours, and it was a bit of a, okay, yeah, that's probably what that's about. So sometimes it's worth looking at the personality clashes and thinking, I wonder what that's telling me about myself. Is it telling me, is it showing me something that I don't like, a characteristic I don't like about myself? Is it showing me a characteristics I would like to develop? Okay, so those are sort of different types of conflict, and as I mentioned, if it gets left unsaid in different situations, be that personal, leadership, career, that can lead to an explosion of sorts. And I have certainly conducted enough team workshops to see that, where I get called in where, you know, it's been left to the last minute to deal with things before there's a big project, or, you know, it's not ongoing work, which is so important because things change in business and teams all the time. And in companies, it's important to make sure that, you know, if you are leading a team or part of a team even, you can flag it and say, look, let's get together as a team and figure out goals, etc. Okay, so there's a really interesting piece, as I mentioned before, when I talk about conflict, that people think, oh, you know, it's not a great word, I don't like it. So I've talked about reframing that word using different language, but people quite often avoid it, and I've often wondered why that is. And I think it's a lack of confidence, or they just don't feel that there's a clear way to express themselves or talk about it and resolve it peacefully. They sort of doubt their ability to guide the conversation or put forward a compelling case, or sometimes it's, do you know what, that person is so smart, it's going to be an argument that I lose. Now, you know, arguments, I would actually reframe that as well. You know, if you're arguing is very different than trying to overcome a conflict. So don't automatically think you're going to build up into an argument. Try and really put your personal feelings aside. And that's something I really start telling people when I talk about this particular area. So as I said, I'm just skimming a bit of the surface tonight about different aspects of conflict, but I think people really doubt their ability to remain cool and collected and have a compelling case. So if there is something that you want to talk about, prepare it. Even if it's a discussion with your partner, think about, you know, what you want to say and how important is it for you to win your point, or think about the other person, whether that's a business associate, a colleague. Hopefully we all want to have positive, supportive relationships and continue to build those. And those relationships will continue if you find an effective way to resolve any differences of opinions and conflicts, and can be open and professional about things. And even with your partner, you know, just think about that person, that's somebody that you care about, hopefully, unless you're picking a fight for the sake of it, and you want to sort of get to a win-win situation. So the aim is getting to a win-win, not I win, you lose, but kind of a win-win in terms of how do we get to a situation that works for both of us. So I think, number one, just really control your emotions, manage your stress. By all means, don't discuss anything when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're in the heat of your feelings. If you're feeling really, really triggered and stressed, then just forget it. Do it another time. But talk to the person and say, look, I would like to talk to you about X, Y, and Z, say it in quite a neutral, professional tone, in a personable way. And then say when would be a good time to discuss it. And it may be that they've got time now, and if you feel you're ready to do that and you're prepared, then go and do that. But maybe, speak to them and set up some time to say, look, I'd really like to set up some time to talk about this particular topic, and make sure it's not done in the heat of the moment, because what happens is you get this kind of snowball effect, where the snowball just keeps getting bigger and bigger because the situation keeps running and running and running away with you. So make sure that you set aside time when you're not stressed, when you are calm, to be clear about the fact that you want to talk about this particular situation. Set time in the agenda, and by all, make sure that that's at a time when you are you're not stressed, you are in control of your emotions, or able to balance your emotions, and just deal with the facts. That's the next piece, particularly when it is around business. Nobody wants to be faced, whether it's a personal relationship or a business relationship, with somebody highly emotional that's saying, you did this, you did that, you did the other. That is not constructive, and it's not going to help your career for sure. And I'm not a relationship coach, but I bet you bottom dollar it's not going to help your relationship either. So be really, really clear about if it's in business or even again personal. Ask questions. I wondered, what was behind that comment? What was it you wanted to say? What did you want to get from that interaction? Ask open questions. Don't say, why did you do this? Why did you do that? You did this, you did that. I know I'm exaggerating it with my tone of voice, but that can sound quite judgmental. It can put somebody on the defense, and sometimes the best form of defense is attack, and that attack may well come back at you. So really think about, as I said, being de-stressed, taking deep breaths, find that good time, prepare your points, ask those open questions, suspend judgment. The number of times I've seen aha moments in team workshops where somebody has said, oh, I didn't realise how much stress you were under because you hide it so well. Okay, so then maybe I need to show you when I'm under stress, or tell you when I'm under stress, or be more honest about what I can deal with at this point in my career or in my role. So it's amazing how often assumptions can be, I won't use the phrase that a lot of people use because it includes a swear word, but you get my drift. Assumptions, suspend assumptions, pretend that you don't know anything, pretend that you're looking at something from above, that you are somebody that's just landed on earth and you don't know anything about the situation. Be neutral, suspend judgment, forget assumptions. So just try and be as neutral as you can, and that's where preparing your points and preparing some open questions to seek more information before you make your points is really important. And then make your points saying, well, when that happened, I felt like this, for example, and make sure you substantiate things, not to defend yourself, but make sure you say things in a friendly, professional manner. Take your time, take pauses, because even for the most assertive amongst us, it might be a bit of a shock. People can become a little bit emotionally hijacked by their own feelings if they're not expecting it. You may need to stop the meeting, regroup, take a breather, make sure you're both in a good place to have this conversation. Being hungry, angry, lonely, tired, not always the best time to have these conversations. So just make sure you're both in a good place, you've prepared your points, open questions, you're remaining neutral, and just take it slowly. You can do things such as mirror somebody's body language. It doesn't mean mimicking. So if somebody's like this, you could try mirroring their body language. That shows empathy with somebody. It shows that you are where they are. It doesn't mean mimicking every single movement, but maybe just mirroring their tone or their body language. Now, if they are talking in a very excitable, emotional state, you can maybe slow your tone down to really help bring them down as well, bring them a bit down to earth, okay? So we don't want he said, she said, all of that, hearsay. Just stick to the facts and stick to your points and stick to the issue at hand. Let's not go into well, I think you're this kind of person, I think you're that, because that's going to damage your relationship, and that's only your opinion. And who says your opinion's right anyway? It's just an opinion, and I'm sure people have views of you. I mean, goodness knows people have had views for me throughout my life, and I just think, well, actually, if only you knew, you're just making an assumption based on something that doesn't have a lot of legs behind it. So yeah, don't be scared of conflict, you know, address it. There's a really, really good model. It's called I think it's called the Thomas and Kilman model. If you look it up online, I've got a picture of it here actually. I don't know if it's going to come out very well, but in the middle there, you can see this box which is called, I can't read it upside down actually, compromising. Now, that's where you get to a solution. So on this box, you've got people that are very, in different quadrants. You've got people here that are competitive. They might be quite high energy, quite assertive. So they kind of almost don't mind conflict. They maybe get a bit of a buzz from it. You get people that are very collaborative, you know, that they are, you know, they are still kind of high energy, but they are more willing to collaborate. And then at the bottom, you get more of the kind of lower assertive behaviours. So at the top, where you've got competing and collaborating, you've got some sort of high levels of assertiveness depending on the person. And there is a questionnaire you can do around this model to find out your typical conflict style. But at that bottom, the bottom squares, you've got avoiding and accommodating. Those are people that will bend over backwards to avoid conflict. Now that might sound great, but actually it can be quite frustrating, and it's very healthy to be able to discuss and address things in an adult to adult manner. So the model there is like 4 boxes with compromising in the middle. Now, I've got a bit of a view about compromising. I actually prefer to collaborate on a problem. I think compromise, you could replace that word with choices, because for me, when you say compromise, it sometimes has that charge of, I'm going to have to give something up here. As long as you're willing to give it up, that's fine. That's your choice. So maybe you can switch compromise for choice. What choices are we going to make? And I really, really love this idea of collaborating, where it's like, okay, right, hang on a minute. So this is a situation that's ongoing. Right, so for example, you're taking too much of Tom's time for projects. So you brainstorm it, you work together, and you come up with ideas of like, how can we alleviate this conflict or this disagreement? And then you have you write down a few ideas and you rank them A, B, C, D, and E. And you go, right, let's try solution A and B, and let's see how they work. Now, you don't agree to things that you don't agree to things that you don't actually agree with. Just agree with things that you think you would be happy to support and you can live with. So, because otherwise you are over compromising. But this is about making choices and being very open about brainstorming. Okay, so that's been the Facebook Live for tonight. It's been about conflict, and we've covered a few different areas. I've talked about how you can reframe conflict, call it something else, give yourself some phrases that make you feel a bit more positive about dealing with a situation that potentially you need to deal with. I've given you a few tools and tips which you can, although you know this page is more for career and business and leadership style themes, then you can also use them in your personal life as well. I've talked about different types of conflict: leadership, work style differences, cultural clashes, personality clashes, and what you can do around those. I've talked about how you can work your way through a conflict. I've given you some different tools, tips and techniques to take the pressure off and really deal with it in a neutral, calm manner. I've talked about why people avoid conflict, and I've talked about a model that gives you a few words or a few different approaches that can help you deal with conflict. So it's been great sharing this with you tonight. It's a subject I'm really passionate about because very often I get involved. You know, coaching is and even training is quite often designed to diffuse conflict, diffuse situations, and I really like, you know, as a solutions focused person, it's something that I really enjoy. I want to get to that win-win. I want to be working and dealing with people who want to get to a solution. And sometimes what I've found is what appears to be a conflict can really result in some great ideas and an enhanced relationship. So it's nothing to be scared of. I'm sure you can all deal with it in your own ways, and these tips have hopefully, I'm sure, helped you this evening. But anyway, have a good night. Take care. Bye.